This is the story of good and of evil, and of the eternal struggle between them, says the publicity handout for The Night of the Hunter. From the very beginning, Hollywood has concerned itself with good and evil, much more explicitly and directly, perhaps, than the theatre. From westerns and cops and robbers to The Exorcist and Star Wars, the opposition of these two great forces has formed the subject matter of a huge number of films. Both of tonight's films, Night of the Hunter and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, of course, fall into this category, although both approach the matter with a deal of subtlety and ambiguity. In fact, The Night of the Hunter opens with the lines, "Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." These lines could stand as an epigraph for both films. All is not what it seems. Beneath the surface lie terrible and perhaps irrepressible forces. Evil is not only outside us, but inside us. Charles Laughton was 55 when he made The Night of the Hunter. He had behind him a career of the utmost distinction, as an acclaimed stage actor both in the West End of London and on Broadway. As a film actor, he had given in the 30s and early 40s a succession of performances among the greatest ever committed to celluloid, but he'd never directed a film. Not, at any rate, a whole one. He had shared the direction of The Man on the Eiffel Tower with Franchot Tone and Burgess Meredith. The film was not successful, artistically or commercially, but the sequences that Laughton directed do have a certain flair and distinction. He and the cameraman, Stanley Cortez, established an immediate rapport, and it was to him that Laughton turned when he came to make his first film. Davis Grubb's novel, The Night of the Hunter, was a bestseller, though Paul Gregory, Laughton's shrewd manager, whose idea it was that Laughton should direct movies, had bought the rights even before publication. It was exactly the sort of book to appeal to Laughton, a story of Depression America in which a monstrous itinerant preacher marries the wife of a man hanged for holding up a bank, then pursues her children down the Mississippi to get hold of the money. It's an evocation of a deep South world of oppressive communities, simple emotions, hymns, picnics, decency, and destruction. Laughton loved America, especially rural America. To adapt the book, they hired James Agee, an inspired choice, apparently, the author of Let Us Now Praise Famous Men and A Death in the Family, besides the screenplay for The African Queen. He was, alas, drinking himself into the grave in short order, and the resultant script was 350 pages long, a transposition onto the screen of every little detail of the book. Laughton took on writing the screenplay himself, and within weeks produced what by any standards is a brilliant adaptation. He'd never written before, but maneuvered into a position of sole creative responsibility, he proved himself a master. He was luckier with his other collaborators. Walter Schumann, who had written the music for John Brown's Body, provided him with an almost continuous texture of hymns, children's catches and songs, plus, when required, music embodying threat or evoking nature. Hilliard Brown, his art director, and Cortez, the cameraman, stretched themselves to the limit to help him realize the visual world he imagined. They'd run and rerun D.W. Griffith's films before starting work, and the same lyrical intensity and simplicity of those films is what they were aiming for. Laughton was a passionate art lover, and indeed collector, and every set, every frame, is informed by a deep awareness of composition and spatial relationships. Above all, Cortez said, Laughton had a wonderful sense of light. Cortez had been director of photography on The Magnificent Ambersons and said that of all the directors he'd ever worked with, only two, Wells and Laughton, had understood light. The film contains sequences, an underwater scene with the drowned Shelley Winters, for example, which were immensely complicated to achieve, though their effect is of the utmost simplicity. The mode of poetic intensification, which Laughton desired, is remarkable above all in the riverbank sequences as the children escape down the Mississippi. All the more extraordinary for having been shot entirely in the studio. When I tell people that, they go white, said Cortez. The integration of all the elements, design, light, music, is another of Laughton's great achievements. He worked in the closest harmony with all his collaborators to realize his very clear vision. The story is really a nightmarish sort of Mother Goose fable, he said. As the remark implies, the story is told from a child's perspective. The central character is John, the little boy entrusted by his father with the money. He and his sister Pearl are caught in a tug of war between good and evil, embodied in the fable by Robert Mitchum as the preacher pursuing them and Lillian Gish as Rachel. Mitchum, the children's stepfather, is the bad father, repressive, frightening, treacherously hiding behind a pretense of caring for them. Gish is the sufficient mother, nurturing, genuinely caring, offering love without conditions, strength without threat. So the struggle here between good and evil is not seen as external or cosmic. It is domestic, actual, something we all know about, the stuff of dreams and nightmares, our deepest fears and our highest hopes. Alas, the film was a flop. It broke Lawton's heart. It's wonderful that now the film has come to be acknowledged as one of the masterpieces of the American cinema, but it's tragic that we've been denied the other remarkable films that would certainly have followed.